Hi everyone, it's really nice to be with you all virtually. I'm sorry I couldn't be there this evening in person, but I'm really excited to read an extract from the novel I've been working on with the Escalator programme. My name's Isabelle Higgins and I'm a writer based in Cambridge. This extract is from a novel that follows the life of a young girl from her birth to when she's age 21, with one chapter for each year of her life. As well as focusing on the main character, Mariana, the novel also closely follows the life of her mother, Elsie, and her grandmother who came to the UK from the Caribbean in the 50s as part of the Windrush migration movement, and her mother, who is the daughter of her grandmother. So we're looking at three generations of women throughout the novel, as well as a much wider cast of characters, mainly family and family friends. So at this point in the novel, Mariana's mother, Elsie, is trying to come to terms with the sudden and unexpected death of her husband, Ed, and also trying to cope with various members of both her family and Ed's family who are trying to help her and Mariana, but in ways that often cause just as much pain or difficulty as they do help. The attack, or what Elsie thought of as an attack, came from all sides. She wished she could resist it, but it was too well planned, too well executed, and its persistence was more than she could handle. First, it was her mother, calling the phone, an old landline that sat on the kitchen table, at 7 a.m., 7:05 a.m., 7:10 a.m., 7:15 a.m. every morning. If Elsie didn't answer, her neighbours would start banging on the wall. "Pray with me," her mother would say when she picked up the phone, and if Elsie tried to say no, her mother's voice would get stronger and harder, and at that time in the morning, with sleep still in the corners of her eyes and gunk between her teeth, it was easier to obey. They'd do the Lord's Prayer and a few of the Psalms, Elsie repeating line by line after her mother, feeling like she was a small child again, feeling like it was Sunday. And then her mother would ask for Mariana, and after Mariana got off the phone, she'd solemnly fill 2 bowls with Weetabix and milk and place them very carefully at the tiny kitchen table, before telling her mother, very seriously, that Grandma had told her that they must both eat breakfast. "Both of us, Mummy," she'd say emphatically, and the worry in her eyes was too much for Elsie. And so she'd sit and eat, watching her daughter watching her, Mariana's little shoulders relaxing with every mouthful that Elsie took. Then it was Francis, asking casually in one of his calls if she remembered his friend Theo, the one who was trying to write instead of act. Theo wanted a country getaway to focus on his writing, Francis said, and would pay £300 to stay in Elsie's cottage for the Easter week. Elsie hesitated, but not for long. That would cover the car tax and the MOT. And then it was Andrew, insisting that Elsie and Mariana stay that whole week with them, that it would do no good to have Mariana around because the boys on the street outside were driving him and Lisa mad. And then it was Richard, calling from London, saying that he and Patience had heard from a friend of a friend that Theo was staying in their house, and why didn't they come down to London for the second week of Mariana's Easter holidays so that Theo could extend his stay. He was really terribly behind on his script and needed much more than a week, Richard said. And before Elsie could say no thank you, he said cheerio and told her to watch out for the post. And when it came, the very next day, there were 2 first-class return train tickets to London as well as tickets for a children's matinee. The show was Ballet Shoes, one of Ed's favourites. Elsie's eyes filled with tears and she wept for the rest of the morning. She was too tired, she thought, for any of this. When Francis called that afternoon, a cautious expectancy in his voice, she told him not to bother to feign surprise. The bitterness of her anger energized her, and she marched up and down the kitchen, the phone held to her ear with her shoulder, her voice rising and rising, the neighbours beginning, all over again, to bang on the dividing wall. "Fuck this," she screamed, slamming down the phone, pulling on her boots, leaving the house through the back door and scrambling over the garden wall down the hill into the valley. It was foggy again, that year, those months. The ground squelched underfoot, sheep emerged suddenly from the cold, wet air, and the earth was boggy and uneven. Elsie pulled herself through patches of grass and reeds and sharp stones, not trying to find or follow the footpath that wound down the hillside. At the very bottom of the valley, there was a small woodland. Pine trees, their scent strong in the damp air, rose from dark earth. There was little undergrowth, just a littering of pine needles, and, in the centre of the woodland, a small stream, water pouring steadily over a limestone bed. Elsie sat on a tree stump by the water. There was no sound from the road above her, no farmers out on the land around her, and the sheep in the fields, often running and baaing, seemed subdued by the heaviness of the sky. She thought about Ed, teaching Mariana to paddle here all those summers ago. Mariana's chubby legs and baby feet gripping onto the slippery stones, Elsie with her heart in her mouth watching them, and Ed, with his hands under Mariana's armpits, laughing at his daughter's surprise, the way her mouth opened wide at the coldness of the water. Elsie sat for a while, and the air was still.